Welcome to the Temple Geek Podcast. My name is Maria. I will be your host as we share our thoughts about Kevin can F himself. If you haven't caught up on the series, save this episode for later and come back because there will be spoilers. If this is your first time tuning into Temple of Geek Podcast, welcome. The Temple of Geek Podcast has been around since 2012 and is hosted by various geeks from the Temple of Geek team. We cover all manner of geek, pop culture, news, and events. To our returning listeners, thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate you being here. With me today is Kevin McRoberts himself, Eric Petersen. Welcome, Eric. Thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to talk to you about this show. How are you doing?
Hi, Mario. How you doing? Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to talk to you about the show today because I know that you've been doing a lot of great work for our show of publicizing the show and talking about it and breaking it down and explaining the deeper meanings to a lot of the stuff to the audience. And so that's sort of how we connected through TikTok because I thought your videos were so insightful and wise and thoughtful. So I'm happy to talk to you today.
I really appreciate that. So for people that aren't familiar with the show, Kevin Can F Himself is a show about a married couple in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is such a mouthful to say.
Worcester.
Worcester. There we go. That's much better. I'll do it with a Boston accent.
yeah.
It plays out like a typical 2000s sitcom. However, this time is told from the perspective of the wife, Allison. The show balances two TV genres of the multicam laugh track sitcom with the drastically different dramatic lens as we see what it's really like to be married to Kevin. So I have to start off by asking, what is it like to play the infamous Kevin from Kevin Can F Himself?
Well, for me, it was a really cool gig from the get-go, the entire casting process and hearing about the show and the show's formation. I'm sure we'll talk all about that. I was super excited to be a part of it because, as I've said in other interviews, I love multicam sitcoms and the American sitcom as a genre. And so I was really excited to be a part of a show that had a totally original take on that genre. It was also very exciting to be a part of a show that had a truly original idea because, in today's, media culture, it's so saturated and things have been around for, a long time now that truly original ideas are very hard to come by. And when you do get to be a part of something like that, it feels exciting and it feels like, wow, we're breaking new ground on a new way of telling stories. So already being involved with the project was really exciting. And then playing the character of Kevin was tricky. It hurt my heart sometimes to have to do it, to say some of the really truly terrible stuff to the character of Allison, played by the wonderful Annie Murphy. It was fun because I did get to sort of flex some of my, physical comedy muscles and do some fun classic sitcom stuff. But it was cool to be doing a show like that could be considered sort of light and fluffy, but knowing that there was this undertone to it that was really giving it some importance and some weight. And then as an actor to get to be able to, again, spoiler alert. Yes. Somebody posted something on my thing yesterday. I had posted some behind the scenes stuff and they were like, whoa, you got to post spoilers. And I was like, this show's been out for like 3 years. Like, come on. Like, and it wasn't my first post about it,
Yeah. I got that too. Don't worry. Even though I put spoiler alert, they're like, you didn't do it fast enough. And I'm like,
right.
Come on. I don't know what else I can do.
But that all to be said, now that we've set the spoiler alert alarms off, to get to do that big final scene at the end and to sort of show the audience that like, as a character, it's not what you thought it was. Or maybe you did, but this was sort of validation of what you thought it was. And then personally, just as an actor, it was cool to be able to show people like, hey, I don't just, do silly goof 'em ups, like I can play dramatic stuff as well. So it was an all around great experience working with great people on a show that I think was important. So it was 2 thumbs up for me.
Yeah, that was a great answer because it literally encapsulates everything I wanted to ask you. Especially that final scene, which we can get into towards the end more. So I want to know how it was. But how do you approach a character like Kevin, considering the sitcom elements and you brought up the physicality and all the comedic timing for one thing too, but then also knowing the baggage and the layers of it. How did you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, number one is as an actor, and I've played bad guys, not in all of my career, but I have played bad guys in other stuff. One of the main things when you're an actor playing a bad guy is you can't judge the fact that he's a bad guy. You know, every character views themselves as the hero of their own story, you know, and even the worst of the worst see what they're doing as even if were a like maniacal, psychopathic, like just like I want to murder the world kind of person, you would have a reason for doing it, even if it was the world is terrible and it needs to go down. Like that is in your mind as the bad guy, that is a valiant, like that is a positive goal that you are moving towards, right? So as an actor, you can't ever judge the actions or the intentions or the wants or the objectives of your character as being bad. Like they just view them as being good. So like the way that I viewed Kevin, even though he was a selfish prick who was, you know, like so unaware of all the people around him and how his actions were affecting them, he viewed it as like, man, I'm having a great life. And aren't I proud of myself for like making this great life for myself? And things always seem to work out for me. And I have great people around me and they seem to be having a good time too. So I bring the life of the party. Like these are all positive things while truly delusional. Through Kevin's mind, he's not doing anything wrong. Like he really is like, I'm a great guy to be around. So you have to sort of view it through that way. You can't judge like, oh man, he's so rude to his wife. He's so rude to his friends and to his dad. And like, that's not how he views it. So as an actor, you can't sort of like put yourself in there. Now, once the show's done and I rewatch it and I can be like, oh man, like he really is such a dick, you know, then you can have those judgments once the project's done. But like when you're doing the actual doing of it, you just have to find the positive in that character's mind. So that's sort of like how I approached the you know foundation of the character. And then in regards to the sitcom stuff, it's interesting. When I auditioned for the show, I was at the time I was actually teaching a sitcom acting class.
No, because you teach as well, right?
Yeah. And so I haven't taught for really since I started doing Kevin. I haven't been teaching, but so this is like the real nitty gritty of it. I taught at a school that was called Studio School. I think it still is going around. It was a newer school. It was this idea that they put a college campus on a working television studio, like on the lot. And so the students were able to come in and they did, you know, it was a regular college. It was like a 4-year accredited college. But like when they were doing their, you know, Wednesday afternoon acting class, if the courtroom set that Scandal uses wasn't being used that day, the deal with the lot was they could go in there and film not their big final, but just like their Wednesday afternoon, you know, acting 101 class on the set. So it was this really cool school that was allowing students to be like in a working TV studio and movie studio and like really see what that's like and have access to the sets and some of the props and lighting. Very cool. Anyways, so I was teaching at that school and I was teaching a multicam sitcom acting class that literally from the room that I had my audition in that was on the same lot, I literally said to Valerie and Craig, our creators, I was like, see that room right down there? That's actually where I teach multicam sitcom. Like I could point to it. It was on the same lot. It was kind of cool. And they were like, whoa, this is like, you really get it. Like, you know, the genre. And I was like, yeah, you know, not only have I done a fair amount of multicam acting, but like I'm teaching it. So like, I'm talking foundationally, I know how, you know, how it works. So they were very excited about that. And one of the big things about multicam is that it does have its own rhythm to it. It has its own sort of cadence that the way audiences expect to hear the dialogue. And it's, you know, it's a little sing-songy. It's very clear about here's a setup, there's the punchline, then we hear the laugh track, right? And so audiences know that cadence. And so being aware of that, I think really helped in the audition and then obviously in the shooting of it to sort of be like, there is a way that multicams sound to an audience. And it's not totally natural. It is kind of its own style. So me being sort of really familiar with that and having a lot of experience in that, I think really helped as I was, you know, playing this dastardly character. If you put the sheen of the American sitcom and the like, isn't this a fun, lovable, goofy guy on top of it, if people aren't paying attention, like if you were just walking through the room and saw Kevin Kneff himself was on and you weren't really listening to it, you might be like, oh, is that a CBS sitcom that Chuck Lorre made? Like that was the goal.
Yeah. No, and I want to say that it very much translated. I think like the one thing about the show is just like the talent and the dedication that went into the writing and the people that really understood the genres is so clear. As someone who loves sitcoms, and this was like one of the discussions I've had on the internet, is trying to get people to understand that the show also does love sitcoms, but it's asking you to like subvert those expectations of what you see. And it's so clear by the messaging. So I'm really glad that it's very clear that you have this appreciation and skill set for sitcoms and you really knew the genre and that the creative team did too. So I was actually wondering, like, did they approach it? Like, is it a sitcom? Did they approach it as a like dramatic lens? How did they tell you the show was going to be? How do you sell a show like actors?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think like what the pitch was. I mean, basically how the process worked was I, got the script and went in and auditioned. But I mean, we did have conversations in a way that you don't necessarily always have in an audition room. Sometimes you just come in, you do the audition and you either get it or you don't. But this show really did. Valerie was wanting to be very clear about tone and like what the show was and what it was aiming to be. And one of the things that Valerie and I talked about was that, a concern of mine going into it, especially as the audition process was sort of continuing on and it was looking like it might happen for me, is I was like, as I just said, like, I love the sitcom. I don't want to like blow up the genre so that we never make another multicam sitcom. Like I like that genre, but, and it was very comforting to me that Valerie was like, I also love that genre. And there's a lot of history in that genre and a lot of important history for American television in that genre. That what we're trying to do, and I've said this before, is to sort of like take that genre, but like shake some of the dust and some of the old school ideas out of it, but then put it back in its place and say, okay, now Hollywood, make the next great American multicam sitcom, but let's lose some of the sexism, some of the, racism, some of the homophobia. Like, let's lose some of the cheap laughs and still use the art form of the American sitcom to tell great stories. Because, I'll get on a soapbox here for a second, but, I think what's important about the American multicam sitcom is the history that it has brought into America with I Love Lucy and the Honeymooners and All in the Family and like these really important shows and Cheers and Friends and Seinfeld and all this stuff, that to sort of just say like that whole genre is bullshit, I think is not great, and it's not great for our history. But why it is important is that the idea behind a sitcom is that the situations change, but the characters never do, right? And that's the difference between any show, Grey's Anatomy or something like that. That's where like characters are changing. The situation is actually usually pretty much the same. There's always somebody coming into the emergency room, but the characters are changing. But in the sitcom, in the multicam sitcom, the idea is that the characters don't change. We know what to expect. We always know how George is going to walk into a room on Seinfeld, and we love that. We want to see the situations, why he's walking into the room, change, but he as a character fundamentally doesn't change. So I think there's something about like consistency to characters that is comforting to America. That's why we like shows like Friends and stuff like that, because we're like, oh, we know how Chandler's going to react.
It's a
we know
for a reason.
absolutely. And it also is like, I love good sort of like clean, easy comedy. While there's absolutely a place in the world for biting satire that tries to change societal norms and say things about where we're at as a people and how we can be better, there's 100% a place for that. There's also a good place for like, hey, I got 20 minutes before I fall asleep. I want to watch something and kind of giggle before I fall asleep. Like that's important to life as well. And I think that the sitcom does that. And so, especially the multicam sitcom. So again, going back to your original question, it was important to me that we weren't blowing up the genre. We were just, re-examining it and pointing out some of its fundamental flaws. So that was really important to me. And speaking with Valerie through the audition process as she pitched the show to me, I was like, okay, good. We're on the same page with that. And then, as they described the other half of the show of what it was, essentially follow Allison and show that like, this classic character of the sitcom wife who is just terribly underwritten for, decades. Let's like really, really re-examine who she is and what's her life like and what are the ramifications of her dumb husband's actions on her and her life. So the whole thing was, I was like, this is going to be great. Like I knew even before I got the gig and even before we started shooting, I was so excited. I was like, this is going to be such a cool thing. And I remember even as we were going through the audition process and I had some other friends who were auditioning for the show. And then once I got it, they were like, man, I read that pilot. Like that is so cool. Like, how did nobody think of this before? Like
I've watched the show twice, but even when you were describing it, I'm getting goosebumps again. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just such a good thought. And like, it was necessary and needed in our like media climate for a while. So the
100%.
fact it was it was so good. It's just, I think I sent this off recording, but like, I love this show so much. It's one of my favorite shows. I can gush about it. So like hearing you talk about it is so valid. And I'm just like, I love it. I'm getting goosebumps all over again because I'm like,
I love it.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So speaking of the sitcom, the dramatic lens, is there any storyline that you wish you were a part of? Because you were very much like only in the sitcom storyline.
That's a great question. I haven't been asked that before. I mean, the first thing that jumps to my mind, and this is such a dumb thing, but I love ice skating. And so when Neil and Patty got to go to do all that stuff at the rink,
yeah.
I was kind of jealous of that. And I'll be honest, I actually did go with them and I brought my hockey skates. And so I was skating around the rink that whole day that they were filming, not the whole day, but for the first part of it before the cameras were there. And I was like, oh man, I wish I could be in these, ice rink scenes. I know. Yeah.
It makes super sense like Kevin would be into ice skating. I'm very surprised that they didn't do a whole
Totally.
storyline about that. Oh,
and,
yeah.
And imagine what he would have done with blades on his feet. I can't
want to, but like,
can't even imagine.
No, that would have been great. So we were talking about sitcoms, like, sorry, not to jump all over the place, but what characters did you find inspiration from? Because there was a lot of great 2000s sitcoms that like I've even like drew parallels from. Were there any shows that you watched that really helped you get into the mindset of Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that I think the two main character archetypes that I was using or directly pulling from were Ralph Cramden, played by the great Jackie Gleason in Honeymooners, and Peter Griffin from Family Guy. Okay. We're sort of like
a little bit of Peter Griffin in there.
And the things that I was taking from that is both of those characters have a cartoonishly, ridiculously overinflated sense of self-confidence that has no basis for having that sense of self-confidence, right? Both of those guys are underachievers who really have not done anything great in their lives, but they have this belief in themselves that they are awesome and everything they do is great. And so this just like delusional self-confidence for comedy's sake is really like, that was the foundation for me of who Kevin was. But then, I mean, obviously you can look at, there's, Home Improvement and Archie Bunker. There's a little bit of Archie Bunker in there as well. But I mean, the two big ones were really Ralph Cramden and Peter Griffin.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite sitcom? I should probably ask too.
Oh, I'll say a few because I don't know that I could say just one. One that honestly was like just I loved, and I remember the whole journey of like episode 1 to the final episode. Fresh Prince was one of my favorite shows of all time. I loved watching it. I loved watching reruns. I thought, Will Smith at that time, whatever Will Smith is doing now, we won't talk about that. But like as an actor, seeing him like get better and all that was great. It was funny. It was irreverent. It had heart. For me, the big thing is like having heart. I love a very special sitcom episode. Like the episode when Will's dad like comes and then leaves him and he has that whole scene with Uncle Phil. I mean, like, it's so great. Like, that's great acting. Like, that's not like cheesy sitcom acting. Like, that's great acting.
And I would say that Uncle Phil was such a great like comparison of like a good father figure and good husband for that time. So I'm glad you put that show for that reason.
So I mean, I loved Fresh Prince. That was one of my favorites. I love Cheers. Seinfeld, I love Seinfeld, but I don't think I was probably a little young to be watching. I mean, Seinfeld was really out when I was like in high school. So I saw episodes, and since I've watched a lot and loved it. But I would say, yeah, Fresh Prince, and I did love Home Improvement, and that's probably being from the Midwest. There was something about like
That's true.
just the Midwestiness of it that I liked. Yeah, so those were probably some of my favorites from when I was a kid.
Has playing Kevin and being part of the show changed the way you've approached sitcoms or watched sitcoms since?
Yeah, it has. It definitely has. You definitely, if you watch old reruns of those types of shows, you're like, oof. It's a lot of squinting and going, oh gosh, oh my gosh, that is such a like cheap joke, or the stereotypes are so bad. Now, I do think that there's something to be said that like culture can only move as far and as fast as it can. You know what I mean? And so I do think that to put what we all sort of like know and accept now to be good behavior, and to put those sort of like same constraints on something from 1980 is maybe not totally fair. It doesn't mean that that's okay and we're just like brushing it under the rug. But I do think that like society changes and we all evolve and we all become better people and we all have more empathy and we all become more inclusionary. And as that happens as a society, then we're like, okay, so let's make things going forward with that in mind. Because there's things that we do today that, 30 years from now, our kids are going to be like, I can't even believe that you would have the audacity to say that. Like it will be so insane to them. And so we have to somewhat remember that. But it definitely has changed how I view it. And then to be totally honest, as an actor, as like auditions come in, the industry is pretty slow right now just for a lot of other reasons. But it has made me like look at certain projects and be like, I don't know that I can like go in for that. Like I've now essentially been a part of a show that has given a real sort of like, hey, be better kind of stamp on society. And like, sure, as an actor, I'm trying to work, I'm trying to get a job, but I do feel like I've been a part of something now that has made a statement and has sort of drawn a line in the sand a little bit. And so to be a part of something that's not going to try to aim to be on the right side of that line, I think is something that I can't do. Like that's something where I have to talk to my agents and be like, I don't think I personally can be a part of a show like that. Like I need to be a part of something that's going to be on the right side of where we're trying to go.
And I will say that like with sitcoms, because this is something that I've always believed, I'm sure I made a video, you've probably watched it, because I say this a lot, that like I think television is like the most like a tangible way for everyone to like kind of access knowledge and history these days. And I feel like sitcoms, if you look at all the popular sitcoms of every decade, it really is a reflection of like what people are going through. Very much like how the horror genre is also a reflection of society.
Sure.
So I love that we can like kind of watch our progression through sitcoms. And it's really great as an actor to see that progression as well. Like it's, I don't know, very wholesome to hear that like TV does have this effect on all of us.
And it's important. I mean, like the television is important because it's not movies. Movies are an amazing experience of like walking into a theater and getting your popcorn and having that communal experience, right? And, looking at things on your phone is a singular experience for you and the device that you're watching it on. But the television in people's living rooms or bedrooms, that is more often than not happening either with your family, with your spouse, with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Like that, it becomes a communal experience. And there's an old thing about with actors talking about how movie actors, if you're a big movie star, people feel like, whoa, they can't approach you, right? Because like you're a movie star. But as an actor, if you could be the biggest TV star in the world, people will come right up to you and talk to you because the way that they viewed you was in such a homey environment. They were in their bed. They were in their family room. So you feel a part of their family. You don't feel like this thing that's like, whoa, a movie star that I saw at a plate. It feels like you've been in my house. You've been in my living room. So I can just come right up to you and be like, hey, what's the deal with this? Or, whatever. Like, and so a lot of times TV actors that become big stars will talk about how it's different than being a movie star actor where people feel unapproachable. If TV stars, people feel like they can just like come up and talk to you because you've spent nights and nights in their bed or in their living room. That's how they view it.
I always say like they feel like my new best friends.
Yeah, totally.
TV. So speaking of watching TV, I think the biggest, like the most exciting thing about for me is like there's been a new audience because Kevin Can F Himself was now on Netflix.
Yeah.
Did you anticipate the popularity that would come from it being on Netflix?
No.
And how do you feel with the new viewership? Like just how's that experience been?
Yeah.
Love.
So it's been amazing. It's been really cool, and it has been unexpected because so we shot the show in 2020, 2021, maybe into 22. I can't remember exactly, but essentially in 2020 is when we started. And the show came out on AMC. At the time, AMC had a new streaming platform called AMC Plus that they were trying to get people to sign up for. And they really kind of used our show as like, look at this cool new show. If you want to watch it on AMC Plus.
I got AMC Plus to watch the show, just to say.
A lot of people did. A lot of people did, yeah. And I think they actually they told us when it was happening, they're like, "Oh, your numbers are driving so many people to AMC Plus." But then they're like canceling their trial after they watched the show.
Also me, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. So, and when it aired on TV, it got promotion. I don't want to be one of those actors and be like, they didn't promote it at all. Like, they did some promotion. They didn't do a ton, but it was on some billboards here in LA. I don't know about a ton, but regardless, it came out. People that saw it loved it. A lot of cool, industry people. There was a lot of buzz about it when it came out, but then it sort of was done. And I was like, all right, well, it had a good moment while it existed. But I guess that's it. And then I heard, it's going to Netflix. And I was like, oh, great. Maybe some of my friends who were like, I don't want to get AMC Plus. I'll be like, hey, you can watch it on Netflix. I had no idea that it would sort of pop off in the way that it has. And it's been really cool to see so many people, A, finding it, B, enjoying it. And a lot of people being like, where did this show come from? I would totally have watched more seasons of this. And I mean, I think Valerie has said it wasn't necessarily intended to just be 2 seasons.
Oh, really?
No, I think that in a perfect world, I don't think it was a show that was going to go 10 seasons. But I think that Valerie would have liked to have done 3 or 4 seasons. I think that's probably where
there's a demand for it. I will say people want it. I would love to see their an interpretation of other sitcom tropes. It would be. People want more for sure.
They definitely do, I think that the show has established that this is a way of telling stories, and the sort of jarring aspect of the lens change between multicam and sitcom says so much to an audience, and it always keeps them off guard. So I hope that we're not the only show that ever does this. I hope that more shows do that.
I do too. I'm surprised it's not a more popular genre.
Yeah.
This leads me to this conversation has been so great with flowing because it's picking up all the points that I wanted to talk about with you. Let's talk about that ending because I think up until that point, I love how this show has such a visceral response of when you're watching it because you feel this gut punch. You also question reality, and I think that ending scene where Kevin is finally in the dramatic lens, it goes from the multicam to the singular camera, is really just solidifies everything the show has built up to that point. How did you prep for that? How did you feel about it? Was it exciting? I just want to talk about that day and that shoot.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'll tell you, when we first started, Valerie said, we will never see Kevin in the single cam. That was her policy in season 1. She had said, she was like, and I was like, really? Come on, it'd be so great. And her attitude was that he doesn't need the single cam. He exists solely in this multicam world where people laugh at him, at his jokes, and everything goes right for him. And he doesn't ever need that, right? I think the audience and the writers, upon seeing the first season, there was a lot of people who were like, we've got to see Kevin in the single cam. We have to. It just felt you felt a need to see that side of him, to see Allison's perspective. So then once season 2 started and we knew the show was ending, and Valerie said, we're going to have Kevin in the single cam, and I was super stoked. And now selfishly as an actor, I would have loved to have done more single cam scenes, right? I think it would have been great to sort of be able to do both of those and show both muscles and all that. As a storytelling device, I think the decision to wait until the very end of the show was so powerful, and it made and I mean, not only for my viewing of the show, but essentially most of the response that I've gotten from people is like, that was so powerful. We all knew it was coming. We all wanted it to happen. And when it did, it just was like so satisfying. So that was great. In regards to the filming of it, it was a lot of pressure because like I wanted to make sure that I could deliver just as an actor, that I'm going to like hit all the beats that we want to give. I was, there was a lot of discussions, and we probably, when we shot it, there's probably like 8 or 9 takes, which is more than usual, that we did before we really got into the run of it, where we were kind of testing different levels of performance to feel different enough from the multicam Kevin to the single cam Kevin. Some were really, really still and really like dramatic and losing all sense of like any kind of schmacky, multicam stuff. And some were pretty close to the multicam, and we just want to see like, does the lighting itself change it enough, And so eventually I think where we landed was a great sort of like middle of the road, where obviously the performance is turned down in a pretty dramatic way, but then also the combination of the lighting and the roof and music and losing the laugh track and all of that, it all sort of like helps to show him in that light. But we definitely did. It wasn't like one take and like, yep, that's exactly what it was. We were sort of playing with size of performance for what was going to feel right. And then once we got into it, it was like being in a great like acting scene with Annie, and the writing was really good. We knew that we had laid all of the groundwork for all of these moments to sort of flower up or blossom up in this way. I thought Annie was so great. There was a real sense of danger in the scene. It felt, important. It was one of those days where, sometimes the crew is sort of like, even if you're filming dramatic stuff, sometimes the crew is sort of like joking around and everybody's joking around. Okay, rolling. Everybody gets serious. We film it, cut. Everybody goes back to joking around.
Yeah.
This day, like, it was pretty somber. Like everybody was pretty aware, like we need this to be really good and hit the right tone. And so there was definitely that sense of it on the day that like, let's make sure that this really is great. And then we shot it, and I felt good about it, and Annie felt good about it, and Val and Anna DeCosa, our director, felt good. And we were like, all right, great. Let's see how it works. And, we shot that same day. Thank you. That same day we shot all of the, all the stuff with the burning of the trash can and all of Allison's stuff. And yeah.
Well, so that actually brings up my other question. There's been so many great theories. Like I've gotten a lot of questions about like, oh, why do you think Kevin lied about the baseball card? Why do you think he had the passport? Do you have a favorite theory? Do you have any theories that you want to like clear up?
Yeah, I'll say this. I don't. So, because a lot of people think different things about that. First of all, I do not think that Kevin killed himself. I don't think that he intended.
Wow. Okay.
I don't think that he intended to off himself. I think that is the true Kevin there. That's Kevin wanting what he wants. He doesn't get what he wants for the first time, and it throws him off so much that he flies into a rage. Why he has the passport, I think, is again his controlling nature. I think the burning of it was truly a fuck you to, and he was so mad and felt so, hurt and betrayed that she would leave him and all that, right? And so he burns all her stuff.
Why does he have the passport? Did he steal it from her?
I've never really.
That's it.
I think he would have. I don't know that it would have been like a clandestine. Like I'm going to steal. I think he just. Yeah. I think he knew where it was, and when she, disappeared, her stuff was there, and so he had kept it.
Just took it. Okay. I thought that was like whenever she wanted to go to Paris, like he just took it from her.
That he had it for. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my theory.
I like that theory. That's pretty good. I hadn't thought about it, but that's kind of good. If it was
because remember all the sorry not to get you off, but like I remember there was like so many things she wanted to go back to school. She had that paralegal job. She wanted to go to Paris. So I'm just like I feel like, and we had seen that Kevin had like infiltrated every aspect of her life to control her. So I felt like to control Paris, it was to take the passport. Like that was my process.
I like that. The only problem I have with it is I don't know that Kevin's that smart.
Okay. See, I don't know. I was like, is Kevin really smart, or is he so dumb that he's smart? Like, it's just like you
Sure.
can't tell with Kevin, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think that there is somewhat that he is lucky that a lot of things just work out for him. I do think that he maybe played a little dumber than he was in reality, which I think the single camera scene sort of shows us. But yeah, but going back to, I don't think that he offed himself. I really think that he was just drunk and dumb and burning stuff. And as we know, he has a problem with fire and controlling fires. I think that
Yes.
he killed himself unintentionally is sort of that was the way that I took it. I never thought of it in a like, I'm burning this house down and I expect to go with it. I take it as he was burning something and he did it in the living room instead of outdoors because he's an idiot. And so that hopefully, and again, what I like, I would never tell people, like, if people want to feel that he killed himself, great. That's the beauty of television, is that like the story is out there, interpret it how you will. I like what I say or felt, frankly, doesn't really matter. Like, you, the viewer that watched the thing, however it makes you feel, that's your experience. Like, I'm not the authority. Yes, I played the character, but like, it's now out in the world. It's not mine anymore. Now it's for people to take however they're going to take.
That's actually such a good point, because I've always believed that, like, with TV, especially, like, people will say like the curtains aren't blue when it comes to like discussing like meanings of shows and themes. But I'm always just like, well, it's art, so anyone's interpretation is valid. And what I really love about Kevin Kepp himself is, like, on rewatches, there's so many layers. Like the whole, you had mentioned like his like propensity to cause fires, and like there's this running theme that like, oh, Neil is the one that has an arsonist problem, but Kevin's the one that's showing it. And there's like these just, the show is just so smart with the layers. That's why I wanted to bring up theories, but I wanted to say, like, all the new people that are watching the show, what do you hope that people take away from the show and remember the show in the future?
Well, I hope that people, watch it, they tell their friends about it, because I think one of the cool parts about this show in particular, and that's not the case with all shows, not only does it start conversations in regards to, what did this mean, or what was the importance of that? People do that with Game of Thrones and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, let's really break down the minutia of it. That's great, because that's just people talking about art, as you said, which makes me happy. But I think it then also leads into conversations about, like, what are appropriate behaviors for husbands and wives and men and women, and the way that people are talking. And, I've had quite a few people, especially, let's say, slightly older men, people in their maybe 50s and up, that have watched the show and have sort of been like, oh, shoot, I think I kind of was a Kevin. And not in like some of his worser ways, but just in like a dismissiveness of their wife, or a sort of just like, I'm the life of the party. Who cares about the consequences? Other people will clean up my mess, right? Which, it can be innocuous in and of itself, but I think that the show has caused a lot of men to sort of like take a little look in the mirror and be like, am I being the best version of myself? So
I've had that conversation with a few men too since they watched the show.
yeah, and that's exciting to me, that a show not only would spark conversation just about the show itself, but like the societal impact of the show. So that's sort of my big hope, is that people see it as an interesting show, people see it as a slightly important show, that people see it as a new way to tell stories, and hopefully give all the people that were involved with it their flowers, as the kids say, and sort of be like, wow, that was a really cool piece of television that you guys made together.
Yeah. Speaking of making things together, I should have asked this sooner, but like, what was it like working with Annie Murphy and like such a great ensemble? I think like I wasn't familiar with anyone before Annie Murphy, besides Annie Murphy, I mean. And so like, what was it like working with such talented people? Because like, I don't know, this cast was wonderful. Like, they really sold the characters.
Yeah, it was a great cast. We were all sort of new to each other, which was awesome. We've all become very good friends, which is great.
Amazing.
Yeah, Annie was awesome. I mean, obviously, she was coming off of Schitt's Creek. Like, she literally won the Emmy for Schitt's Creek like 2 days before our first day of shooting, like our first day together. So she had like just won the Emmy, and then we like started like a couple days later, which was Amazing. There was actually a plan for a minute. We ended up not doing it because she won the Emmy and had to do some things. But so because I told you we shot during the pandemic, me and my wife and my two kids, instead of flying to Boston, because again, this was like very early in the pandemic where there was not a lot of answers about a lot of things. And so I didn't feel like amazing about getting on a plane. And so me and my family rented an RV and we drove from LA to Boston over 2 weeks. And it was like this amazing.
No, wait, you guys shot in actual Boston for this?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
wow.
So we
Commitment's so real.
Yeah. So we rented this RV and we drove for 2 weeks across the country. And Annie was in Toronto at the time. And so we were going to be passing right by Niagara Falls as we were kind of going to Boston. And so Annie and I had talked about possibly that she was literally going to, there's a bridge that goes like from Canada to America. And she was literally going to walk across the bridge to America, get in the RV, and then do the last leg of the trip down to Boston. She ended up having to win the Emmy and go to some fancy Emmy stuff. So it didn't end up happening, but we had talked about that. But yes, we did shoot it in Boston. We shot it in Brockton, which is a little town in the suburbs of Boston. And it was great. So we had a soundstage, like everything that we shot in the house is all on a soundstage, and the diner's in there and Neil's house is in there. But all those exteriors, when they're at Dunkin' Donuts, when they're outside of the house, when they're on the porch, that was all a real house that's in Brockton, Massachusetts.
That's so cool.
I think it was good. It was good because, we were sort of immersed in the culture as we're living there, and like we're picking up the accent in a better way. We're just getting a sense of like the people of the Northeast and specifically Boston. And then a lot of our smaller roles were all cast with Boston locals, which is why a lot of those, like people that came into like Patty's, salon and stuff have such great accents because most of them are local Boston actresses. So
it really helped with the authenticity for sure. And there's a lot of sitcoms that do take place in the North, like New England area. So I figure maybe that's where it was drawing. So it was pretty clear. So I love the show. This was such a pleasure. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the show that I missed that would be fun to discuss?
What? I mean, I think the main thing is just that, I want to say thank you for having me and chatting about this. And as I said at the beginning, I really appreciate all of the work that you've put in of talking about the show and breaking it down for people and getting conversations started. And I'm just really glad that, people are finding it and people are discovering it. And, I hope more people do and that it leads to big opportunities for, all the creators and all the cast. And yeah.
I hope it continues. Like, it would be so cool if you guys could do like another season, if Valerie wants to like do some other trope, because there's a demand for sure.
There definitely is.
I have to say that I do, like I've mentioned this so many times, I love this show. Whenever I watched it, I felt like such a hole in my heart because I wanted to talk about it so badly, but like no one had seen it. And I remember like looking up, and this was before I started making content. So I like looked up information about the show to watch videos. No one was making videos. So like when it was on Netflix, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start talking about it. So people were reciprocating and letting me talk about the show too much. I'm just happy people wanted to listen because it's a great show and it deserves all this love.
Thank you.
Talking to you about the show and like all your knowledge, all your talent, all your appreciation for the genre has been like, I don't know, this gives me so much joy. I'm like, feel really giddy.
I'm happy. This has been great for me too.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've been working on lately? What are you up to these days? Any way people can follow you on socials? What you like all that is right now?
I'm very excited. I'm still an actor 100%, but I'm starting to direct more, which is exciting. And so I'm actually directing a play here in Southern California that's going to be at the La Mirada Theater, which is a big regional theater here, doing The Play That Goes Wrong. If anybody's ever seen it, it's one of the funniest shows ever. Even if you go into YouTube, if you're hearing this for the first time, go into YouTube and search Play Goes Wrong. Watch the little 10-minute version of the show that was done for the it's like the Queen's Royal Variety Hour in 2015.
Oh, okay.
Really funny. That's like a 10-minute version of this full-length play called The Play That Goes Wrong. It's a murder mystery that but it's sort of like Noises Off, where the actors forget their lines and lose their props and the sets fall down and everything's wrong.
Great at that.
Yeah, that's it.
After seeing you as Kevin, you're going to be very
Yes, it's definitely a lot of physical comedy, which is my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm working on directing that right now. But if people want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at Eric Pete, EricPete. You can follow me on TikTok, which I'm trying to do more of, which is at Eric Petersen 44, and it's Petersen, S-E-N. Just people a lot of times spell my name wrong. Eric Petersen 44, and then
I spelled it right.
you did,
right?
you did.
Okay, yeah, I was like, I'm making sure.
and then the last one that I like to tell people about. So I love clothes and fashion, and
Okay.
I really have always just loved men's fashion and even women's fashion, and like I love the way that clothes make people look and feel, and talking about clothes. So I have a fashion Instagram called at the Portly Gentleman, all one word, the Portly Gentleman, and I post a lot of like outfits that I've worn to premieres and to, you know, when I was doing Broadway stuff that I would always dress up every night at the theater, because my feeling with the site, what I want to do with it eventually, is that, like, you know, there's plenty of guys who are not, you know, model skinny and sort of like feel like, oh, well, I can't wear cool clothes because I'm not like, you know, 125 pounds, like, you know. And my feeling is like, hey, I'm a rounder guy and I love clothes, and there are ways to get cool clothes and put clothes together that present yourself in a really fun, cool, professional, classy way. So hopefully that's what I'm trying to do with the my little side hustle, I guess, of the Portly Gentleman. So people should check that out as well.
That's amazing. That's awesome. This is going to be the wrap-up episode of Temple Geek Podcast. We want to thank everyone who tuned in today, especially our guests, for being with us today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit us on Facebook or Twitter by using the handle Temple Geek. Do you want to check out some of our other episodes? Why don't you head over to templegeek.com, where you can find all sorts of content pertaining to the world of geek. And that's our episode.